Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and the system that we've got out here on the bench is my now 234-day-old African nightcrawler system. And these are not the African nightcrawlers I got most recently from Gaetano. These are the ones that I got from Emily. So these go back a couple years, and what we did in this system here was we let the system run for its first 200 days as just your everyday composting system, during which time it was fed 20 times, and that day 20 we decided it was time to give it its final feeding. Day 200, on its 20th feeding, we decided it was time to send it into the stage that follows, which I usually treat as foraging, which really just means no fresh food, just, focus more on the stuff that's already existing in here as leftovers, leftover bedding, leftover food, try to work that down, which has been going now for almost 5 weeks, 34 days. Tomorrow it'll be 5 weeks that's been going. And when we last checked in here 10 days ago, we had made the decision to demote the previous covering that had been on here, which was a sheet of plastic. And even by then we had started trying to cinch in the edges of the plastic to start revealing the outer edges of the system. Mainly for the purposes of trying to allow for a little bit of airflow and evaporation and drying. It just seemed like with the plastic there, though, that wasn't really progressing the way we had hoped. So we had moved over to using the paper only, which still allowed for the same amount of direct access to the air, but now this middle section would also be permitted to lose a little bit of its moisture through that paper. And we were just hoping that over the passage of time, the material would get worked down even further than it already is by the worms, breaking down the residual little bits of leftovers. And as you can see, there's stuff in here that's obviously not anywhere near the size of what you would expect worm castings to be. There's littered bits of all kinds of stuff in here, and it's kind of typical in my systems. But, you could either just wait for that sort of stuff to eventually soften up, get consumed by the worms and broken down, or just factor in a little bit of extra work, perhaps a little later, to maybe just separate it from the castings with a screen or something. But it doesn't seem like material that's worth waiting for at this point. I would say the 99% of what's in this system anymore is castings, with, tiny percentage of residual leftover bedding and food bits. I guess this just interested me because I saw a little itsy bitsy tiny worm sitting there on the surface. I thought I'd try to bring it up closer, but at the same time I thought we would also just sample a good sized hunk of this material just to get a sense of worm density within it. And there's nothing special about that section that I just reached into. There was no secret stash of food placed there to cause worm traffic. I think that's representative of the entire system. So you can imagine that this system probably has a good number of worms living in it. I'm just spotting, cocoons all over the place. Not sure how well they're coming up on the camera, but I do feel like I'm spotting them here and there as I'm sort of tilling up the material. And you know what? I totally forgot. One thing I've been trying to build into my routine here, and it's kind of new, so it's not surprising that I forgot, but I'm trying to combat flying insects in my systems, and I started applying that BTI bacteria solution. It's marketed as mosquito dunks or mosquito bits or whatever it's called. So I've got a solution that here in the bottle, but a lot of times I've just put it in at the end somehow. Last time we had soaked the paper that we were resting across the top with the stuff, and then assumed that this stuff would eventually permeate down into the system and propagate on its own. But really, if what you're trying to tackle is flying insects, this stuff goes after their eggs, I believe, or their larvae, which you would have to imagine is just on the very, very top surface, that top skim surface. So before you start blending that material that's out on the surface down into the material at large, that's the time to hit it with this stuff. So I had even pulled the bottle out and had it sitting here next to me, but then I jumped right into the bin without doing this first, so we don't really have the full benefit of having the entire top surface material treated this way, but it's the next best thing to completely forgetting. So apologies for that little intermission disruption there. So I'm almost feeling like the system has not hardly dried off any. It's still got so much moisture to it, and you wouldn't hardly tell from looking at it, right? Because in the video I'm sure you could see it crumbling. There's nothing that wants to pull together to become a big muddy ball or anything. It's all really nice stuff. I guess it's just not at that consistency where it would flow. It still is clearly damp. You could feel it, and it probably does behave a little bit differently than if it was, dry enough to almost be able to be poured. I mean, yeah, I guess you could pour this, but still, there'd still be that little clumpiness, I think, happening from the moisture I feel here. And besides cocoons, the other thing, I think that was the reason I had grabbed into that first block of material, was because of the little itsy bitsy worms that I saw floating around on the top of it. So, I mean, the big worms are clearly obvious. They're just there, and they're all over the place, but it's the little ones that just seem so cool because of the sheer number of them. Oh man, it's a pretty cool bin. It does seem like if we were to get these little guys relocated, it might make sense to split them up and get them working on 2 new bins instead of just 1 new one. I mean, yeah, granted, it's fun to have a system that's pretty densely populated. It's always like guaranteed worm spottings when you come in for maintenance on the bin, but if the worm population senses that they've already kind of reached capacity in terms of population density relative to the space they've got available to them, they'll control their population and they'll sort of top off. And it's kind of hard to imagine that they would view this environment as still having tons of available space of it. Here it just feels like this is the kind of dense environment in which you would expect that natural response within the worms to kick off and perhaps slow down on their reproduction, with the sense that there's already tons of babies floating around in here. So I'm starting to wonder if we want to even put the paper coverings back on. I mean, I came down here, prepared to set up a migration zone for them, which really means I would just push all of this to one edge of the bin and then create a nice fresh pile of bedding for them to move into. And that would probably be a welcome addition. They would probably be thrilled to have something like that going on here that they can move over into, because there's probably a severe absence of any food leftovers and probably no bedding at all left in here. So they'd probably be psyched to have a fresh spot to move into. But then I also feel like the moisture of the material could potentially be just like a resisting force that would maybe overpower their desire for fresh bedding. Just the coziness of this material, the dampness of it. So this ain't really a piece of leftover bedding or even a food scrap. It's a tea bag. I found a big pile of them that I had sort of collected together into a single spot. I'm just trying to get these cocoons that are stuck to it off, because I'm pulling it out every time I find one of these tea bags. I'm pulling them out because I've just found that they don't go anywhere. And last time we pulled as many out as we could find, the little collection we had already set aside, as well as 1 or 2 I think we found along the way, like this one we just bumped into. And there's little worms in here, like I don't know if you're able to even see them on the camera, but they are so small. I usually use like eyelash size as like a good comparison. Perhaps not on, girth, but definitely on like the length. And what I came for originally was the cocoon that I had spotted on here. I'm just checking to see if there's any others. So easy for a little tiny worm like this to get just, stuck on your glove and you don't even realize he's there. And that could be deadly, for a little wormy. So I try to be careful, make sure that doesn't happen. So, I guess just by the nature of what we did here, which was like just poke around, try to fish out tea bags, explore the density of the worms and stuff. So just by giving ourselves this little tour, we've really accomplished what my main objective here was, to pretty much aerate the system. Even though I was prepared to set up a migration area for the worms to start moving into, I do still feel like doing so with this much moisture present might be a futile effort, because why would they want to leave this stuff? This stuff just seems so perfectly well suited for wormies to live in. So I think we're going to have to up our game, though, in terms of getting to our objective of just more cocoons, getting this thing dry enough to potentially have a batch of worms here motivated to actually move out, you know. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of people in the comments are going to say, why not start the migration? What do you have to lose? I mean, not like I'm trying to gear up for a race so that I'm primed for the quickest reaction and response and action from the wormies once it gets going, you know. If it takes a while, it takes a while. And maybe it would make sense to start rounding them up in case it does take a while. But I think today the only thing we're going to do in addition to aerating the system, kind of exploring, is I'm just going to leave this thing exposed to the air. I'm just going to let it start airing out, ventilating directly to the air, the full entire top surface, and see where that leads. You know, a lot of times I just don't like to do that, thinking that it's like an invitation almost. I don't know why. I'm in my house. Not like there's all kinds of weird things flying around, birds gonna land here, and oops, I almost threw the cocoon over where I was gonna put the tea bag. Sometimes I get yapping and then I don't pay that much attention. And I guess my hands know they're trying to accomplish something, but then I get mixed up on which hand's doing what. And you can see me picking out things that I know aren't really castings at this point anymore, so I don't know what I'll do with those, but it doesn't matter so much. I don't think there's much more to do in here, though. I think we're good to go. We'll just let this continue drying as is. And at least now I got a clear view into what's happening if I walk by and I peek in here. So back onto the shelf with the system, but now this bin gets to take the position on my shelf where I've always got it reserved for the oldest of my systems. The oldest of my systems is on the top left, and then I start putting the newer and newer stuff alongside, keeping them in sequential order in terms of their ages, and this one has been now around, as far as active bins, the longest. The one that had been the oldest last time we were in here 10 days ago has since been pretty much had the last of the worms hauled out and the castings harvested, and there's not much else going on there. So this is now my oldest bin at 234 days old, and we're just going to keep going with this drying and foraging for a little bit longer, I think. But who knows? Maybe we'll be able to pull the trigger on setting up a migration zone for these little guys soon, so they can start moving out. We can start rounding them up and getting them relocated into new homes. So I got a little bit of stuff to take care of here as far as, you know, cleaning things up and putting things away. But I'm not going to waste your time with that. That's boring. Before I go, though, let me really quickly say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. There's also memberships. If you join as a member of the channel, as a supporting member, then you can provide the channel with a little bit of a donation, a little bit of financial support for a small fee, and that's also very much appreciated. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.